Welcome to Real GM Radio. I'm here with Dave DuFour from the Athletics NBA Daily Show. We've got a bunch of stuff to cover, including some big picture thoughts about Luka, LeBron, and the Lakers, Jimmy Butler, and the Warriors, plus SJ's scoring streak, and the futures of the Suns and the Mavericks. Let's jump in. It's Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Dave DuFour. You can find him every weekday at the Athletics NBA Daily Podcast. Dave, I want to jump right in with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has 4 50-point games in 40 days. That's basically since the start of season 2 of Severance. That's all it took for him to put up 4 50-point games. It basically took Shai the start of the season of Severance, what it took Klay Thompson 3 presidential terms to accomplish. 4 50-point games. I don't know what other way we could try to frame it. That's why I'm kind of doing these exercises, because it's remarkable, and yet you watch him play and you're not surprised by it necessarily. What have you made watching Shai do this?
You know, it's funny. I talked to Fred Katz. He just wrote a big feature about Shai, and he went into the background and how this guy trained to score like this. When he added that step back 3, he pretty much became unguardable. So now he can hit a shot from anywhere on the court. That was the one thing escaping him. I still think, to see him have a certain 3-point shot where he is just elite, maybe he's 40% off the dribble, maybe he gets to 40% on step backs. I mean, that's maybe the next step for him. But obviously he gets to the line, he gets to the rack, he has an amazing mid-range jumper. He also can pump and take 2 dribbles and take that long 2. When you can score like that, it's hard to scheme against. But then he's surrounded by talent that makes you pay. So if you start throwing 2 and even sometimes 3 at Shai just to make him give it up. I mean, Jalen Williams had a great season. Aaron Wiggins shooting the lights out here recently. They just have guys that can capitalize on that. Hartenstein has been a nice seamless addition because his ability to take the ball out of that double team and then make a read is huge. So I just think it's perfect player for the perfect system with really good teammates around him. And we're seeing a guy do it and make it look easy.
Yeah, he does make it look easy. There's a little bit of Dwayne Wade, a little bit of Kobe, a little bit of Luka to his game too, where he's got all the angles.
That pace stuff,
It's the pace, it's the figuring out. I love to shout out Fred's piece one more time. I thought he did a terrific job talking about a couple of things that really stood out. How he doesn't go from first gear to second gear. He goes from first gear to third gear, first gear to 8th gear, and then he'll go from a millionth gear down to back to second gear. You just can't figure him out. It's I wrote about him the other day, and it's like trying to catch a salmon with 2 chopsticks made of cooked spaghetti. You can't do it. It's not going to work. You can't figure it out. And the other part from Fred's piece is how he thinks about the game in triangles. Instead of going from where I am, point A to point B being the rim, there's always a point C somewhere.
Yeah.
And when he was laying that out, it makes sense. It kind of, I'm like, oh, I see that. You can kind of see him work those angles that nobody else is thinking of when he's on the court. And you mentioned the fact that he's now developing this 3-point shot. That's been the biggest thing with these 50-point games is now he's hitting those step back threes and those pull-up threes. He's doubled his volume on pull-up threes this year. He's increased the volume as it's gone up, as the volume has gone. He's increased the accuracy as the volume has gone up. And that's sort of just the biggest skill development there too. But he's always had this mid-range step back that to me is the most fun thing to watch. He'll get either to the left or the right side, and he'll put his head down, he'll put his shoulders down like a running back trying to go through the hole. And then all of a sudden he does that 7th gear to first gear, whatever it is. I don't know how many gears there are. I think you probably do.
It depends on the car, right? I've got a Volkswagen that's, I guess it's technically a 5-speed, but it's really a 4-speed because the granny gear, you never use that.
You never use the granny gear, but he uses all the gears. Shai's using all the gears, so it's crazy watching him play. And you're right, he makes it look easy, but I don't think we could take it for granted. Is there? I threw out some names to you. Is there anybody you can compare him to?
I mean, not really. He's kind of his own thing, I mean, there's a little bit of Michael Jordan in there. And I look at shin angle sometimes, like when he drives, and he can He can accelerate and get real low. But he's obviously he's big, he's like 6'5". So he's got that size stuff. I mean, he just very smooth, he's an interesting mix of a lot of guys. You can tell that he's picked up bits and pieces here and there. But as far as comps go, I think he is kind of unique. There are not a lot of guys. I mean, there's nobody in the league that plays like him. A big point guard that is that smooth and under control, and then brings it on the defensive end the way that he does. I mean, there's a reason why he's a top 5 player at this point.
Yeah. I didn't think he was going to get this good.
No, I don't think
even
anybody
last
did,
year,
man.
I didn't think that the next leap was coming even last year when he was on MVP ballots. I was like, if last year was the best that Shai ever got, which again was probably the 4th or 5th best player in the league, 6th best player in the league, somewhere in that, that's a pretty good outcome for him, right? For any player. And then he was like, nope, I'm just going to be one of the best 3 players in the league now. And that's kind of where he is. And the passing, the pull-up game and all that stuff. I will give you one historical name. And I don't know if this is a comparison, but somebody asked me the other day, if this is, let's just assume this is peak Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Sure. We can have this for a couple more years, but let's assume this is peak Shai. Peak Shai or peak T-Mac? Better score.
Oh, man. That's tough because here's the difference in the two, and it's a funny it's a funny comparison.
I took a long time thinking about this. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, you're not. This is fun. I'd rather do this than talk about like empty side pick and roll. In March. Come on, this is an interesting conversation. T-Mac was such a force of nature. Like you always felt him when he would go on those scoring bursts, and with Shai, I mean, I swear, man. You just look up sometimes. It's like, damn, he's got 40.
Yes.
Right?
It's the 50-point game like, kind of snuck up on you.
He's more like KD. I think Shai is more of a KD style scorer. Like he's going to drop 8 a quarter for the next 10 years. 8 a quarter for the next 10 years. Literally. And I think when you're that kind of guy, like he's going to be a 30,000 point scorer for his career, right? As long as he's healthy. But I think he's much more like KD than T-Mac. T-Mac, man, I mean, the highs were so high and there were lows, I mean, this is not smooth and steady like Shai is. I think Shai is much more, I would compare him to KD actually. And even in his game a little bit, when you consider, you talked about that step back mid-ranger. I mean, obviously KD, it's a pull-up, but Shai's pull-up mid-ranger is fantastic. It's one of the reasons why when he was coming into the league, I was actually high on him becoming a good 3-point shooter. He's got such great body control. He had a really nice jump shot, especially mid-range. And he's been so consistent as a mid-range shooter. In his high school stats, like his EYBL, like all of that stuff was super consistent from the mid-range. And it continued, as he was playing in the NBA. So I always had a pretty, I was optimistic that he would become a good 3-point shooter. So yeah, I would say KD more than T-Mac. But I don't hate that the T-Mac thing got me to really think about like the forces at play when a guy is a scorer, right? To a certain degree, maybe there's a little bit of like Carmelo Anthony where it's just smooth, right? Carmelo, you felt it a lot because it was such high volume, but the game itself,
especially
it wasn't
like early career Melo.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Denver. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. When he had good team around him, I think that's actually one of the underrated things about this leap from Shai is that the Thunder have just nailed like the team around him, man.
Yeah.
Chet is perfect. Jalen Williams is perfect. Adding Hartenstein has been perfect. Even Caruso is like an offensive connector guy, has done some stuff. And then obviously that defense being so disruptive, he gets a lot of easy buckets on the other end too. So I don't know. It's like confluence of events, but the guy is ridiculous. He's having a crazy season.
The MVP campaign he's having, he's obviously doing it all, everything that you'd want from him to do offensively. He's even leveled up as a passer, and even kind of going back to the T-Mac thing. Like that's something that Tracy McGrady, he was an okay passer.
Yeah.
Shai's already like way beyond him as just a pure passer.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the weaker points of his game. If he gets better at making reads, obviously the game gets better and easier for him. I mean, that's the thing that I think keeps him out of the Jokic and like Luka sort of conversation is, being able to bend the defense yourself, great. But if you become a threat to bend the defense toward open looks and to be able to take advantage when they, like the skip pass and all those things. But those are going to come for him. I mean, he's a big guard. He sees the court clearly. It's just a matter of getting comfortable with all that stuff. But when he scores like this, I don't know. It's hard to, I can't detract from it because I feel like he thinks he can get a bucket anytime he wants.
And he can. I mean,
right. He's proven it. Right?
Yeah. One more, it kind of reminds me of Giannis a little bit, where this MVP season, first of all, he's doing it on both ends. We saw the steal numbers. Defensively, he's not the best defender on Oklahoma City, but he's a good
Are you
defender.
making an argument for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as most improved player?
I know you're asking that facetiously. The most improved player award is broken.
I made this argument the year that when Giannis won his first MVP, I was like, okay, this guy should also be the most improved player. Like he made such an incredible leap that season.
I think Shai, we need to put some new guidelines in place for most improved, where if you've ever made an all-star team before, or if you were a lottery pick, you're not allowed to win that
I think lottery pick for sure. You just can't make it. But no. Shai is like the jump that he took.
No, in regards to the new made-up rules that we did, it's not most improved anymore. Now it's just like new star player award. It's
guy who got more minutes. Like Ty Jerome, I think should be in the mix for that award. Guy who was like fringe NBA player for a while and now is like, what is he, 27 or something? And he's sticking, with the team contender.
He's been unbelievable for that. Yeah. And multiple different teams to get
also
to this
NBA all hair team. The Cavs have a lot of hair situations going on.
Who's that guy that looks like a walking Zin pouch? The guy that never plays for them.
I don't know.
The hair, he's got like a long hair and a mustache.
I don't know.
I'm gonna look up the roster really quick while I'm talking here. No, but to go back to the Giannis part of this too, in terms of his passing, his name is Luke Travers.
That's it. Okay, doesn't play. So I can't think.
Great hair, top 2 hair in the league, if not number 1.
Max Strus
is phenomenal.
I'm again that team, man.
There's something in the hair.
Jared Allen.
Jared Allen. He's old school, but. With Shai and his passing, it's a little bit Giannis-like, where he's not going to be Jokic or Luka ever, neither of them, because they don't have that innate feel for the passing. Like that's just something you can't teach. But they are learning everything that you can teach, right? Like they're big, so they can kind of see the whole floor. They're seeing the pictures. They're going to get better every year. Yeah. But it's probably always going to be a bit mechanical, and I don't even know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
It's because so much of the development is individual development rather than team environment development.
He's just going to learn
European guys. Yeah.
He's going to learn, if I do X, then Y and Z come open. And if I do A, then B and C will be over here. And if you know that stuff, you could be an elite passer still, but it's just never going to be innate the way that Luka and Jokic kind of make them impossible seem possible sometimes. And you know what? If you're just a hair below some of the best passers we've ever seen, that's not a bad result. So I think he's been tremendous. And again, with the two-way impact, I don't know the last time we had an MVP. I guess Joel Embiid would have been the last one where they were just making a consistent two-way impact, because Jokic isn't necessarily doing that.
I disagree. Okay. I think Jokic is a much above average defender, number one. But I think that like what he does for that team defensively is much more important than it maybe gets credit for. He doesn't collect he didn't get a lot of stocks. Right. But he touches a lot of basketballs, right? Like he creates a lot of chaos. And then sometimes when they're trapping with Jokic, I mean, that's proven to be pretty successful for them in spots. So, and his rim protection is actually better, in my opinion, than people will give him credit for, but he's not he's not to the level of, Embiid, Giannis, the seasons that he won MVP. I think Shai is, below that level. Right, like he's not a player of the year level player. But definitely he is up there above. I'll put him above Jokic, especially in just the role that he's in. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to go guard the best guy every night, but neither do these bigs. So for what he does, yeah.
So something interesting is happening here. Well, before I get to that, any reason to not believe in the Thunder? Because there's a conversation happening here in terms of their youth or whatever like that. Like,
I mean, that's the one thing you say, right? Like they haven't done it, coach hasn't done it. Okay, so it's uncharted territory, but we go through this all the time. We've had a different champion every year for 7 years now. I expect Boston's not going to win. Mm-hmm. as far as regular season wise, like things that I've seen, boxes to be checked, do they have issues? Sure. Yeah. No team in the NBA is perfect. Have they been able to cover up those issues better than most? Absolutely. Did they get important reps without any of their bigs where they figured out Jalen Williams can play small ball 5? Yeah. That's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Can they play Chet and no Hartenstein? Yeah, that works. Hartenstein, no Chet. Oh, that really works. Them together, that's a question they've got to figure out here in the next like 5 weeks. Is that where we're at in the season?
20 games is what I keep saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I don't think like there are any tests for them left in the regular season for sure. We're not getting any answers. Can they make it to the finals until we see who they match up with? Because I think that, again, we're running into, and this is what Parity does, right? Like the styles are going to make the fights when we get to the playoffs. And if you're OKC, like you don't want to run into Denver until you have to because of Nikola Jokic. And I honestly, I think like, you think about the Lakers with Luka and LeBron, like that's a scary team for them too. The teams that have guys who can control pace and have experience, they're not going to get sped up by the Oklahoma City Thunder defense the way that some of these other teams will. Like the Warriors have a propensity for throwing the ball away. They just don't value the basketball. So while I think the Warriors would have a chance against Oklahoma City because they have Steph Curry, I think that Oklahoma City could also like run them out of their house, right? Like they could win in 5 because they're that elite defensively. I think that depends on who they match up with, obviously, but there's no reason to think they can't beat everyone. I haven't seen anything that makes me think they're vulnerable to any one particular type of defense or one particular type of system. It's going to be, a guy beats them, which is possible. Like having the best guy in a playoff series, even if he's not necessarily the best guy, like Steph Curry is not as good as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now, but he could be better than him for 7 games.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm so excited for the playoffs, man. Like I feel like a nerd sometimes about this stuff because obviously, like, it's my job, right? And people think you have to manufacture enthusiasm. And I've had seasons like that. Yeah. But this is one of the more fascinating basketball seasons that I've ever seen. I don't even remember as a kid, like there was never a doubt, during the Bulls years. Okay, I knew the 4 teams that kind of had a chance. And, when the Bulls got to be so good, I knew. We went through that with the Warriors, right? Like that was like when I first started doing this. And now it's like a big snowball of I don't know. I'm guessing, I look at the tape, you look at the way things go. So often guys are injured. The teams are totally different at the trade deadline. And we're all trying to catch up essentially the last like 3 weeks. I don't know how you feel about it, but trying to see as much as I can of these teams and how they've changed. I don't know, man. Your guess on this is as good as mine. I think you could ask someone on the street at this point. It's almost like March Madness to a certain degree. There are going to be matchups that you're going to be obvious. Like Memphis, I don't think they've got a shot at winning a first-round playoff series, right? Houston, very shaky. But, man, OKC, like there's a world in which they get the wrong matchup in the first round, and I don't feel comfortable with them.
It's
crazy to say.
You can't be surprised by anything that happens. I mean, I think you still have 3 clear favorites, but if for whatever reason one of those favorites didn't win, you wouldn't be like, that's shocking.
Right.
And I don't know how I feel about the parity thing that Adam Silver has clearly instituted in the league. Like he made that a priority and he's accomplished that goal. I think there's pros and cons to all of it, but one of the pros is exactly what we're talking about is now all of a sudden these regular season games kind of matter in a way where obviously with the standings and stuff like that, but even when you get into the postseason, when you're talking about these matchups, you get to go back into these regular season games and kind of pick up that film and say, okay, well, what happened in this one and what happened in that one, and how do I think this is going to play out in the playoffs? What did they learn from this? Where I do think that they've lost maybe the casual fan a little bit.
Sure.
Because the casual fan loves dynasties and loves heroes and villains and big stories and big names. And it's been interesting with parity. Also, some of the best players haven't been on the best teams.
Well, this is why we've got this, because right now it's the dead time, right? And this is why we've had this conversation about the face of the league stuff, because nobody knows who they're supposed to shine a light on. And the truth is it's LeBron and it's Steph and that's it. Right. And I would say LeBron right now, just we got to talk about LeBron at some point, because this guy, I've got him. I right now he's first team All NBA for me, which is insane. But the face of the league stuff is all about that exactly. There is no dynasty, and I think like the next best shot would be OKC. But then you start looking at the salary cap, and you know them, and you're like, oh, okay, so they've got a hallway here that's like maybe 3 years. If Sam Presti's really like smart, it's 5 years. But that's not what we're accustomed to. We're accustomed to, well, give me 8 years where this team is going to win like 4 to 6. If they won 8 championships, that's probably too much. But I don't know. The league has done a bad job of selling that. Hey, you know what? It's a little bit more chaotic. Your team might have a chance this year.
Right.
Instead of they're not good at selling hope.
No.
They're good at selling dynasties and glitz and that sort of thing. And it's funny that they drove the league the other way. And I mean, that's probably a gambling thing, just to make it a little bit more,
Well, and they were able to sell like Cavs Warriors for umpteen straight years. They were able to sell that LeBron versus Steph, hero versus villain, whichever side of what team you fell on. And they do sell those storylines because, hey, we're going to put them on prime time this game, and we're going to put them Christmas Day and all this stuff. They're able to sell dynasties in a really meaningful way, an easy way. And I think you're right. I think they're still in the learning process of selling basically what the NFL has is, hey, one right off season, you're right back in the mix.
But they've spent my entire lifetime has not been, hey, root for your favorite team. It's been root for your favorite player.
Yeah.
And it's gotten progressively, more of that. And now to the point where people are LeBron fans. And I mean, you had this guy who allegedly flew from South Korea to see Russell Westbrook play for the 4th time in another jersey. You know what I mean? Like that is in and of itself indicative of the problem here, where you have them rooting for individual players instead of the home team or whatever. I mean, baseball is seen as this dying thing, but the truth is baseball is really strong regionally.
Right.
A lot of people will just watch their team and they'll go to game. You know what I mean? It's different than basketball, whereas the NBA has sort of forced you to follow the entire league. If you're a fan, you know what? You're excited because the Knicks and Lakers are going to play tonight. And that's a huge game.
Right.
Even if your team is the Washington Wizards, who stink. Because that's really what they've done. You got to be a fan of the league, not the team. I don't think that's a great way to run a sports league. And I think that when we hear people hand-wringing about ratings or whatever, I think there's a lot of coded language in that. But I do think part of it is there's just no connection. The player movement that everyone, the league built, their internet presence is built on player movement, right? Blogs sprung up, podcasting, it's all because people got into the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, there's a whole industry behind all of this, and it maybe was a mistake, because where are the sports fans in this? That's the stuff that you're actually selling as sport. And if people don't care about these teams, I think that you've got a bigger problem. So face of the league stuff is also because they just abandon, hey, are you a Celtics fan? It's no, you got to love Jason Tatum and his son. And you know what I mean? It's like,
and you got to buy his shoes. You got to know what his logo looks like
and drink Gatorade
stuff.
And that's where but also it's become a corporate league. It's a white collar league. It's not a crack a beer open and watch it with your buddies league like it was back in the day. Like the NBA was an objectively blue collar league for a very long time, and now it is maybe the most corporately. I mean, NFL is super.
It even feels like you're talking about a corporation sometimes in like their annual sales call when you start getting
they
and
absolutely
the first and second aprons and all this stuff. And that was my biggest gripe is, I mean, I've gotten to know like a lot of like capologist kind of people, even on Twitter and stuff. Yeah. And some of them have just said, screw it. Like it's like they were into the salary cap for whatever reason. Right. I'm not even poo-pooing it. I'm just like, you're into that. That's your thing. And they're like, no, they've even lost the capologists now to some degree. And I think obviously you start losing the casual fan when you start talking about aprons and weird language that you've never even heard in regards to sports. And you're like, aprons? Like I thought that was for cooking.
Well, they don't realize. So they didn't realize how much of the player movement stuff like actually drove their online engagement, and they don't. Shout out to Larry Kuhn, man, because Larry Kuhn like created this entire ecosystem where people would talk about the game outside the game and the behind the scenes game. And the league really didn't take that into account with the CBA negotiations. And obviously nobody did. Not that it should be necessarily a part of it, but that has to be a thing. The team building aspect is something that fans have gotten to be competitive about and obviously knowledgeable about. I mean, how many teams, how many fans do you know that were calling for the Sixers to tank like 3 weeks into the season? They were like, oh no, it's a disaster. We got to pull the plug. That stuff that's kind of important, right? Like baseball got it. So baseball used to do, hey, you go out and you spend a bunch of money. Oops, we're bad. And they would start the sell off, right? And fans knew like, okay, this is part of the process, but hey, at least they went and they tried. And in the NBA now you've lost a little bit of that. Like the hope stuff gets a little bit more difficult when your team can't make maneuvers. In addition to being really bad for the players, this new CBA has been really bad for us to kind of communicate what's happening behind the scenes, because it's like I have to go through what is the first apron so that I can then tell you the second apron and why teams can't do X, Y, and Z. This is why like Boogie Cousins
without your
can't come back.
eyes glazing over.
Well, and for me, now we're really like, we're having like a therapy session about covering the NBA. I'm having the most fun this year ever in a lot of ways, because that stuff is just, you know what? Doesn't matter as much anymore. And the games are so good and competitive. And obviously the skill level is higher than it's ever been. I just get to focus on that stuff, which is awesome. And I think that if the league did more to focus on that, the Oklahoma City, Cleveland, the 2 games that we got, that was the one time that I felt like the NBA, since I've been covering the NBA, built up a game properly. And it helped that obviously these teams are crushing, but they did such a great job of making it have big game atmosphere for both games. They didn't abandon it for the second one. Well, and I thought that was super important.
And what was key there was that those games were a week apart.
Right. Dumb luck, right?
Dumb luck. And so if I could steal one thing from baseball, to use your baseball thing here, and I've brought this up before on the podcast.
Yeah.
The entire season should be built like a baseball season. The regular season should steal that series all season long. The biggest problem between the regular season and the playoffs is they don't look at all like. The playoffs, and you hear this talking to players and coaches, playoffs are just different. They're different because you play the same team for a week or two and a week or two straight. It doesn't have to be 5 or 7 game series, obviously, but in the regular season, 2 and 3 game series, depending if it's in conference or out of conference. Just be tough, and then we can talk about matchups and adjustments from game to game. That there's not enough time, especially on like second nights of back-to-back. The teams themselves aren't focused on the opponent. Why should we break down? You could
solve a lot of travel issues that way. The issue, what I would say is, like, imagine if you're the Lakers or the Mavericks, or you played the Mavericks first week of the season and you got dusted, and now they sell off. They're not even going to make the playoffs. And you're like, oh, well, those 2 losses don't come off the book. So I think that there's a little bit of that where they're trying to sprinkle the schedule throughout so that the varied injuries and things don't affect any one series.
The biggest pushback I've heard is if you're playing the Lakers and LeBron has a tweaked hamstring, and then you don't get to see LeBron at home.
And that's a thing too.
It is. I think it used to be more important before League Pass and every game was on TNT and everything was national and stuff. It's like, you don't have to see every player in your home. Right. There's that was a rule that was instituted at the beginning of the schedule. It's like you want every star player to come to your home arena. But now everybody sees all this stuff on social media. You don't.
Well, again, you have to cover. You have to follow the entire league if you like the Knicks.
Well, let's talk about the Lakers. They've won 7 games in a row. They've climbed up to second in the Western Conference standings with Luka and LeBron, obviously, here. They're the league's top defense since the start of February. Offensively, they look unstoppable with Luka and LeBron on the court. They always have one of them on the court, a genius-level passer, facilitating that offense all the time. I think they've, over this stretch, answered the question about whether or not they're contenders this year. Maybe not the favorites, but they could certainly win this thing. And we even talked about matchups against the Thunder. Who beat the Thunder last year? Luka. Luka's on the Lakers now. So there's definitely a matchup thing there. You saw them, though, beat the Pelicans the other night. I thought this was kind of fascinating. I'm not like a box score plus minus guy here, but LeBron was a +7 in that game. Luka was a +37 in that game. Like, I don't know the last time we saw something like that with a LeBron team.
Never.
Right?
Never.
It's
No. Never. LeBron has always been the best player on his team.
And for the first time, he's not. And
Yep.
and maybe even that might even be debatable right now. Like you said, you have LeBron first team All NBA, but for the first time, I would say since 2011, when that first year in Miami with Dwayne Wade, this is the closest that they've gotten to that, where it's like any other night, every given night, it could be one or the other.
Right.
But the bigger point that I want to get to here, at this stage in LeBron's career, I could not think of somebody better than Luka to pair with LeBron at this point. He could do all the things that LeBron used to do at an elite level. Luka could do that now in terms of shouldering an elite offense. He does them at a high level, the highest level, and he allows now LeBron to pick his spots. And what's fascinating to me, again, all right, they're contenders this year. Cool. We'll see what happens. We talk all the time about when LeBron might retire. Why would he do it now? Before the trade, totally get it. Now, he's got his city that he wants to live in. He has a son on his team. He has the coach that he wanted them to hire. And now he has the perfect teammate. So my question to you is, do you think that the Luka trade could extend LeBron's career?
Does LeBron look like a guy who's slowing down?
Not even a little.
What Luka has been able to do by being there and being able to be this playmaker, and let's not leave out Austin Reeves and the playmaking leap that he's made this season, because that certainly is a part of this too.
And he's never going to see another double team for the rest of his life.
Never. He's going to cook the rest of the year. LeBron has become a hammer, like that big time season, that 12-13 season in Miami. I mean, just supreme efficiency, cutting to the basket. And he's got a better 3-point shot now that he's taken from 30 feet. He's shooting like 43% or something like the last
elite
month.
3-point shooter.
Yeah. He became a freaking knockdown 3-point shooter.
When he gets to that spot on the left above the break, it's
in. It's in. And then obviously, now that Luka is drawing so many eyes, LeBron's just cutting, he's just very simply cutting to the basket. The other night, he's just like directing traffic off ball for Luka to throw passes. LeBron, number one, he looks re-energized, which is funny because he's been having a great year. The last couple of months, again, he's been playing like a top 10 guy. And I would say the last month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, top 5. And all NBA, I think that when you consider all the guys who are not going to hit 65 games at this point, even Jaren Jackson is now questionable, right? Yeah. To hit 65 games.
Giannis is a little shaky too.
Yeah. So some of this is attrition, right? But LeBron's season, I think, deserves recognition in that way. I think if they keep this up, there's a world this guy should be on an MVP ballot even. And I don't see why a guy doing that at his age, as long as he can continue to stay in shape and avoid injury. And now that they have a workhorse, I think LeBron can rest more. Like, he'll be able to take more back-to-backs off going forward if he's going to stay in LA. I mean, why couldn't he play 5 years?
Right.
Listen, I'm older than LeBron. I don't feel much different day to day. And listen, I don't play professional basketball, but I understand the rigors that are involved in it very intimately. I am still an athlete. I do a sport, but I feel just as good as I did 15 years ago. LeBron has access to way more resources than I do. He's probably got someone that does his meal prep for him. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things to working to his advantage. And I think Luka is even he's a rising tide for all of that. So if LeBron was going to play another 3 years, which I think is totally believable, why not 5 now? I mean, what age did Tom Brady retire?
So I'm glad you brought it up. I think he was 40. Was it 45?
I can't remember if he did 45 or 43, but I think that's a number that would be in
45.
All right. If I'm trying to think the way that I think LeBron and the folks around LeBron think, number one, it would either coincide with being able to take over an expansion team or to beat Brady, because what else is there for him to do as a professional athlete to show that he's, like got the greatest longevity, had one of the greatest athletic careers ever? You put him up there with any athlete in any sport. And I think the comp goes to Brady, right?
Yep.
So I think that maybe he tries to go to 46.
I don't see why not. He could just keep signing 1-and-1s until he decides that he doesn't want to do it anymore.
A team will sign LeBron James. You will sell LeBron James jerseys.
Well, but like, why not do it with the Lakers the whole time, right? This is
Yeah,
like
why not?
an ace pitcher, having to throw 100 pitches a game and then just being like, I'm just going to be a closer, play me 1 or 2 innings, and I could do this for another 3 or 4 years. I got you.
Right.
And that's essentially what Luka has allowed LeBron to do. And LeBron could still be one of the great closers. We saw it the other night. Luka carried, I forget which win it was, but Luka carried him for 3 quarters, and then LeBron just had a monster 4th quarter. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. That's the whole thing. That's the formula right there. And in terms of picking his spots, he's been so much better defensively since the Luka trade. It's been night and day.
The Jokic game. Okay,
Yes.
So the game plan against Jokic, where they're fronting him and they're throwing 3-4 bodies at him.
Hachimura was great in that game too.
Yeah, and I worry that they're going to miss Rui, if he misses much time. But he was just super physical, right? And so in that game, LeBron, that was a defensive masterpiece from LeBron. And he's always been a really good rim protector. Low key, that the title run that they went on in the bubble was predicated on Anthony Davis and LeBron James wreaking havoc at the rim. I mean, they were just monsters around the basket. And LeBron is a backline helper. Number one, you save his legs a little bit. But number two, I mean, he obviously loves to block shots. But the other thing is that he's been guarding on the perimeter in a way that I haven't seen him do since, I don't know, playoffs in Cleveland even.
He was picking up Kawhi the other night one-on-one.
Yes. And he never, normally when Kawhi's out there, he's like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. There's that famous meme oh man, he's coming back in.
He's been invigorated, man. And this is one of the cooler seasons. I mean, in my opinion, one of the cooler seasons of any athlete, but definitely for LeBron James. You're kind of right here. And look, narratively, if the Lakers wind up winning the title, wouldn't I kind of feel like, oh man, we should have seen this coming? All because of LeBron, man, and the way that he's been. The defense has just been amazing.
So I don't think that there's any doubt. Even going back to the Olympics, I remember coming out of that Olympics and just being like, oh, he could still be one of the best 10 players in the league.
This is why I felt the way I felt about the Warriors, man. I mean, Steph Curry, right? Flamethrower. I'm just they put a top 5 level defense around him, which they did. And okay, now you just got to get to the playoffs. And then obviously they had calamity along the way. But the Lakers, it was the other way. It was, man, LeBron's so good. Can AD do stuff? And they were doing pretty well. I mean, remember this run that they're on started with AD. AD gets hurt, and then I think things started to be a little clear for the Lakers. They would never admit this, but I think them being able to maintain the defensive level without Anthony Davis made them realize a few things about how Anthony Davis actually worked and functioned in their defense. Great as an individual defender, gets tons of the stats show up for him, but was never lifting that defense into the top 5 category. And so that makes Anthony Davis a little bit more expendable. And I mean, obviously, if you get Luka Doncic,
right, especially when Nico Harrison calls and they're like,
do
you want Luka?
The most insane thing about this, I mean, and it's funny. Well, not funny. I mean, I hate that Kyrie got injured, but in this, sort of public statement Nico makes about Kyrie's injury, he brings up Kobe. And, of all the people, right, you think about Kobe. I think that the Kobe stuff with the Nike folks, it seems to be very important. The mentality, right? Rob Pelinka, I thought, was the most Kobe guy ever, and he traded for Luka. But apparently Nico Harrison is even more of a Kobe guy, because he was
clear that all Nico wanted to do this entire time was have Kobe and Shaq, and he was Kyrie and Anthony Davis. That's my Kobe and Shaq, and you're like, cool, that happened 20 years ago, Nico, and those are 2 of the top 10 players of all time. No disrespect to Kyrie or AD, but those are not quite that. The Tom Brady part, one last piece there. I even wrote about this for Real GM right after the trade, the morning after the trade, after I was done kind of figuring out what had actually happened there. Tom Brady doesn't win that last Super Bowl if he doesn't go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right.
Going to Tampa, sunshine, brought Gronk with him, got a bunch of his guys with him, re-energized Tom Brady, and got him, obviously the supporting staff that he needed to win that next Super Bowl. And I was always kind of wondering, does LeBron have a Tampa Bay Buccaneers in him somewhere? Does he leave? And that was sort of the first thing. Does he leave and go somewhere else and join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and just win one more ring and narrow the gap between him and MJ and continue the comparison between him and Brady? Well, it turns out just implanting Luka is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay came to LeBron.
Right. Tampa Bay came to LeBron. And now I think this is a whole other thing where he looks more energized. Everything that we were talking about there, we are not even close to understanding the ramifications of the Luka Doncic trade here. One of the ramifications could be there is a % chance that it settles the GOAT debate.
No. No.
If LeBron gets somehow 2 more and ties MJ,
it's there's in my
this,
opinion. No. I actually would love to do this. I try to do this whenever possible because I try to think about peaks, not just longevity, because I think longevity is greatness, right? Like, and greatest of all time. But when we're talking greatest of all time, we mean the best. We don't mean the guy who had the longest career. If you hang out long enough and you're that good, and LeBron is amazing, and he's been the best player in the league, multiple seasons. Right? I'm not saying that he's not. You are going to collect things, right? It's like a video game, man. You will collect things. The scoring title, that's fantastic. But like, that is a longevity thing. He didn't take any time off to go play baseball. You know what I mean? Like, okay. But at their peaks, who scared you? Who was the guy that you couldn't guard? Who was the guy that changed the game? And I mean, there's one GOAT, man, and that's Steph Curry. So that debate is over. Now, if we're talking like, hey, who's the greatest champion and winner and all these things? I mean, I think Steph Curry holds up in that conversation too, because he has 4 rings in LeBron's quote unquote era, right? Against LeBron, even head to head at the time when the league is the most skilled, right? This is the best the NBA has ever been. It's the hardest it's ever been able to win a championship. And he's done it 4 times. And I think like as we get further and further removed from the dynasty eras and we start seeing, one-off champions, maybe the occasional, we get a back-to-back, I think we'll have a little bit more respect for Steph and what they were able to do in that, and think about it. They would have had the 2019 title had they not had 2 catastrophic injuries to, 2 Hall of Famers in the finals. So I think about Steph as the GOAT. Now, if the debate is the Michael Jordan versus LeBron debate, I mean, I think that that's a different one. And I don't know if LeBron gets to win that debate by getting 2 more championships.
We're obsessed with new, just in general.
Yeah, we are.
We're always obsessed with new.
Yeah.
The way I've always thought about this argument is if you just swap everything LeBron did, take everything LeBron did, put it in the 90s, take everything that Jordan did and put it now when LeBron is doing it, there would be no question that Jordan was the GOAT because he'd be 6-0 in the finals and he'd have all the things and he would do all this stuff.
Exactly.
I know it's not as simple, but like if somebody just goes 6-0 in the finals and does it as dominant as those Bulls did it, there would be no question and we would just be there. I want to talk a little bit though about Steph and the Warriors here, adding Jimmy Butler, 9-1 with Jimmy Butler in the lineup now. They've moved up to 6th in the West standings. Little help with the Clippers kind of going a backslide here, but I feel pretty good about them staying in the top 6 and in a real playoff spot. And I mean, this team is clicking. I don't think I'm surprised at all by how Jimmy and Steph are clicking. I'm a little surprised by how quickly Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green clicked. Not that they clicked. They would always figure it out because they're so smart. But to do it right away, I was like, oh, this just works immediately, despite all this, everything that they teach you about basketball these days, that spacing is really important and all this stuff. Like Jimmy and Draymond were like, we don't care. Doesn't matter. Yeah. For us, doesn't matter. Are you surprised at all?
Not really. I think more than anything, I'm just surprised that Jimmy Butler has been so available, it's one of the things you and I talked about, I think last time I was here, was just the guy never plays. So just by being out on the court, like he's a great player. So just by being out on the court, he knows how to do stuff. And in a read and react system like they have where, you're just able to freelance so often, I'm not surprised. I think the funnier thing is when you watch like Pajemski out there trying to do stuff and it's like, no, Jimmy's already doing that thing. Oh, Jimmy was 2 beats ahead of me when I was thinking about doing that, and I think Pods is kind of having a tougher time figuring things out there. But Draymond and Jimmy Butler, no, because they're both guys that don't actually want to take a shot.
Right.
Right. So they're competing to try to get Steph shots. Right. And they don't care. So I think that's what it is. It's not even unselfish. It's more fear. But that fear has created an unselfish environment. And then obviously Jimmy knows how to get to the line, and he can score around the basket. He's not Draymond, like really scared of layups. But yeah, so I'm not surprised that it's worked. I mean, these are smart players, and Jimmy Butler knows he has to come in and make it work, because if it doesn't, he's going to have problems. Like, this is Steph Curry, man. This is not Bam Adebayo.
Right. Well, and this is the thing. I mean, here in Miami, people are sort of commiserating. Why couldn't we have this version of Jimmy Butler? Why didn't it look like this? And I keep saying it looked exactly like Jimmy Butler played exactly like this. Exactly. In Miami, the difference was that he didn't have a number one scorer like Steph. And this was the player that he'd have been trying to get and never got. But having, like, Jimmy is the perfect Robin to a Batman. And for so long, he was asked to be Batman in Miami for the regular season, and in the playoffs he can sort of uncork something for a couple of weeks there at a time. But you mentioned just what he's able to add to the Warriors, and there's something I kind of go back to all the time. It's called the Pareto principle. It's like a task management, time management kind of thing. Basically, it says focus on the things that you get the biggest results with the smallest changes from. Jimmy Butler is the Warriors' Pareto principle. You just one new element, dropped it into the mix there, and it fixed all of those issues. The Warriors don't take care of the basketball. Jimmy Butler never turns the ball over. The Warriors foul too much. Jimmy Butler never fouls. The Warriors don't have a backbone defensively outside of Draymond Green. Now they have two with Draymond and Jimmy Butler. He just fixes so many things.
They don't get to the free throw line.
Don't get to the free throw line. Exactly. He gets to the free throw line. And then the other thing about this, which I find fascinating in terms of on the court, Jimmy Butler is not the best teammate Steph Curry has ever had, obviously, but he's very different than the other teammates that Steph has ever played with. He's a play starter, where Klay Thompson, even Kevin Durant in Golden State, those guys were play finishers.
Yeah.
Get the ball to them, they're going to make a bucket. Jimmy Butler is the opposite. He's going to start the play. He's going to trigger your offense. He's going to do all of that stuff. And now Steph, almost like LeBron with Luka, can kind of focus on being more of a play finisher, which is what they need to be at this stage in their careers.
Well, the other thing is that Jimmy Butler, so Draymond Green is a play initiator, but he just is not a threat to do anything else. And so Jimmy Butler is a threat, right? I mean, if Jimmy Butler is doing a DHO with Steph, you got to guard both sides of it. You can't just flood Steph, and forget about Draymond like you can. Jimmy Butler keeps that DHO. He's got options. Draymond didn't. So I think just having a guy who you can trust like that, and it's to a different degree than Wiggins. I thought Wiggins did a really good job there. He's obviously could score in the mid-range, could shoot the three, defended, but you need a guy who's got a little bit more of like an attitude, I think, for this team, who is willing to seek out the ball in certain situations to make sure Steph can get open, or that he's got an option. Whereas Wiggins, again, a little bit more like play finisher type, right? Unless it was an isolation for him.
And those are drawn up, right?
Exactly.
That's Steve Kerr calling it out from the sideline.
That's Steve Kerr calling it. Yeah.
And now Steve Kerr doesn't have to really coach this offense as much.
That's the other thing, man. It's a bunch of guys just running around. And that's what Steve Kerr has tried to get back to, I think since that title team, Looney's drop off hurt them quite a bit, not being able to play Draymond and Looney. And to a certain degree, you wind up getting, now Draymond's a little bit in that Looney role, and Jimmy Butler's a little bit in that Draymond role, and that helped beef your defense up just tremendously. So it's been interesting to watch, but I need to see them beat some teams that are good at full strength.
Yes.
This 9-1, I'm not going to call it paper, but it's,
soft schedule.
It is
even
soft
playing the Knicks without Cat the other night.
Cat, yeah, exactly. So what does it look like? Quentin Post, he's having a nice run. What does it look like against a good team? So
that is my biggest concern with Golden State is, first of all, the size. We're really going to do Draymond at the 5 for 20 more games and then ask him to do it again in the playoffs. It feels like at some point there has to be okay, we saw it. This is probably what we're going to do in the playoffs. Now let's start Looney. Let's start Quentin Post, even if we're not loving the
I think
matchups
Quentin
and the
Post
fit.
defensively can hold up.
He's been all right
In the regular season. I think
Yeah,
he can just hold
regular
up.
season.
You know,
Yeah,
don't
just
start
do
him
that.
against Jokic.
Right. The matchup part of it is the concern there, but then again, we've had concerns about Golden State's matchup issues in the past, and it hasn't really mattered. They've just kind of established their style of play. So we'll see what happens. They also have a really tough path. They're going to have to beat all the good teams if they're going to make a sustained run here from basically the 6th seed, because it kind of feels like the top 5 are pretty locked in. But
we'll see. Memphis is
true.
on slippery slope right now. No Jaren Jackson's bad, real bad. And it's not their offense that I necessarily worry about. It's the defense.
Defense has been bad.
And honestly, Houston, they've got so many guys out right now, and they don't have, their offensive identity is that they don't have one. Everyone has to beat their man pretty much one-on-one. It's why they get into these late game struggles. I mean, both of these teams are first round outs. I think that's pretty obvious. But I'm not convinced that the Warriors can't get to 5.
Being in that 4 or 5 matchup would be the best case scenario.
Yeah.
You're right. They're 3 games back of Houston for the 5 seed, 4 games back of Memphis for that 4 seed. So maybe there is some room to climb there.
I mean, we are not. It's not crazy to think that the Warriors could be the 4 seed and that the top 4 in the West is OKC, LA, Denver, and Golden State.
Well, let's move back to the bottom part of the standings here. We don't have to talk about all 3 of these teams. The Suns, the Sixers, the Mavericks. My question to you is just, who's more screwed? Who's more screwed?
Man, that's tough, because I literally just had a conversation, like, should the Mavs, they obviously need to tank this year, but are they tanking next year? Like, do they need to think about maybe trading Anthony Davis? Right? I had that conversation yesterday. The Kyrie thing it's such an obvious, they're going to give him a contract and he's going to be 35 when he's coming, or it'll be his age 35 season when he comes back. And there's all these, it's a disaster. I think the fact that the Mavs, maybe a little bit like America, had a rough 10 weeks, right? And it seems to have sent them down a very negative path that I don't see the light of day at the end of. It's not great for the Mavs. The Sixers, all right, the Suns, there's a very obvious path to a rebuild there, and they have, an owner that has fake money, right? So, okay. I think the Suns, it's bad, but you've got KD, you're going to get something for him. You've still got Booker, which if you decide to move on from him, okay, so you've jump-started your rebuild from wherever, Houston, however many picks and players you get from Houston, or, maybe OKC wants Devin Booker. I don't know. The Sixers, that's different, man. They've got 2 guys under contract that I wouldn't touch. Look, Wes, I wouldn't sign him to your basketball team if I was an opposing GM, man, because it feels unfair. Like Joel Embiid, the contract that he's on is completely untradeable, and he doesn't look like he's going to be anywhere near approaching the player that he has been. And Paul George, I think that was a bad deal the day they signed it, injury prone, obviously in decline. You should know when the Clippers, who also have infinite money, were just like, nah, I don't know, that's a bit rich for Paul George.
Right.
I can't say they didn't do it to themselves. So the Mavs and Sixers, it's a little bit self-inflicted. I think the Sixers, you have a lot of sympathy, man, because I feel bad. The Jared McCain thing, the one bright spot, and they lose him for the season. I mean, if Paul George had worked out, if he had been healthy, it would have been a good addition. And obviously Joel Embiid is an amazing player to watch when he's healthy. The Mavericks, it's just a disaster. I think they've got it the worst, and they have to tank. And they have to tank maybe next year. And I think they've got to have a sell-off. Like, it's got to be a rebuild. There's no world in which this team comes back from this and is competitive. Definitely not for 2 seasons at least.
So I think you're right. I try to think of the way back for these teams. The Phoenix
of course.
path is the easiest
Clear.
way back. Trade everything, you'll be fine. The way back for Philly is hold on to your guys. Yep. Maybe you've shut Joel Embiid down for the season finally. He probably should have never played at all this year. But
Seeming like it.
Maybe he has a good year next year. He looks something closer to a top 15 player again. Tyrese Maxey is an all NBA level kind of player.
Can we just play Joel at home?
Right.
You know?
Just you get, and then he's healthy for the playoffs, and everything that you thought maybe you would get this year, it happens next year, and whatever. That's sort of the positive path forward for Dallas. That's the part I keep running into. What's the positive path forward? Because here's the biggest problem with the Mavericks. They've lost the fan base. I don't even know if the Mavericks want a championship with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving because of what it all signifies. I don't know that they want a championship with Nico Harrison as GM because then Nico Harrison as GM wins, the guy that traded their beloved superstar. And that's the part that they never really understood is that Dave, I live in Miami, and the Marlins won in 97 and in 2003. And you couldn't ask for a better start for a franchise in baseball. You couldn't.
Yeah, Livan Hernandez, man.
Let's go.
Yeah. Edgar Renteria.
We could keep.
I love to remember guys. I love it.
They had Miguel Cabrera on that 2003 team, homegrown superstar. 2 years later, they trade him to Detroit. He goes on to be a Hall of Famer, Triple Crown, all the stuff.
Yeah.
At that moment, and it took a couple years, but fans here realized, we can't trust this organization no matter what they do. So even when they get another superstar, we're like, all right, this will be cool for 3 years, and then we'll see you later. Sandy Alcantara right now. Everybody, the whole organization is saying, we're not going to trade this guy. He's here. We're not going to trade him. I'm like, he'll be gone by the trade deadline. We just know he will. You've lost the trust of the fan base. And the hardest part about that was South Florida could have been a baseball city.
It should have been.
It absolutely should have been. And now it couldn't be further away from a baseball town. And I think the best sports town in the country are baseball towns.
Sure.
Because you just have endless amount of content and weekday games and things like that.
Dallas is a great basketball town.
It was. And now I'm worried. And I don't know that there's a way to come back because you've lost the trust of your fan base.
I don't want to. I mean, look, I don't have to tell you. Part of our job is we're too online as far as basketball stuff goes. The conspiracy theories out there, they feel more and more plausible by the day, right?
Yeah.
Now, I will
that
just
might
say
be the only option.
The owner, they're not moving the team. They're not going to move the team out of Dallas. That's silly. You know, like Dallas is what, the number 4 media market. That's a huge. There's no way that they would.
Well, that's what the only way to re-earn the trust of the Dallas fan base, the basketball fan base there. Move this Mavericks
I'm about to get
Vegas.
Very cynical. Oh, now maybe.
And then the expansion team immediately comes back to Dallas. So you still have your team and you keep all your records, Cleveland Browns style.
The problem is the people
ownership.
that own the team want to have gambling in casinos in Texas, right? In Texas. And so that's why I think they're there for the long haul. It's also why some of the things where you start thinking, well, hey, maybe they're trying to tank the arena and they can try to build a new one that's out near the Cowboys, and maybe that has a casino. And again, I'm just, spouting out stuff that you read people speculating on. I don't think that's the case. I don't know. Usually Occam's razor, it says, what's the most plausible explanation? And the most plausible explanation is teams not being run by the most intelligent basketball people. That's the most plausible explanation. But if you want to get, down to the nitty gritty, I think the owners really only care about money. Mm-hmm. So what do they care? I mean, they're just trying to get gambling in Texas. So they're trying to stay there. But they have no future. They raise their ticket prices in the city,
unreal.
Dude, you got to do that. You got to find the right time to do that. That's a Friday night news dump sometime in the summer or something. Wait until the team has had some hope. Hey, look, maybe they make the playoffs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But just bad timing. It's almost, again, it's been a rough 10 weeks for the Dallas Mavericks and their fans. It feels like it's done on purpose because it's so on the surface bad. But I think ineptitude is,
I think you read the quotes and the comments from the owner, and you read what Nico Harrison said. I mean, even again with the Kyrie Irving injury, he's bringing up Kobe. It's like, dude, have we watched basketball in 20 years? And I don't think that they have. And look, and what everybody keeps talking about is like an owner would never sign off on this. An owner has to sign off on a trade for a superstar, and that's why all these conspiracy theories come up. And I read those quotes, and I'm like, I think the owner probably thought Anthony Davis was about as good as Luka Doncic.
Right.
because this owner doesn't
Think
know
this is a basketball guy?
And you're right, exactly.
plays
He's
for
like,
the
oh, Anthony
Lakers.
Davis won a championship, plays for the Lakers.
Yeah.
We can go get that guy. And you're just telling me we're swapping offense for defense? Okay.
And you're telling me this guy, all he does is smoke hookah and drink beer, and he's goofing off and playing video games and driving his truck and whatever else you're saying. Right. You're not saying that he averages a 30-point triple-double and dragged us to the NBA Finals on one leg and blah 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 blah. It's these other things, right? Like I don't have to tell you, the richer you are, the more buffered you are from reality. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So whatever the ownership was being fed, certainly he thinks that Nico Harrison is the guy who's the expert. So why wouldn't I listen to him? So I don't know. I don't want to subscribe to the darker forces at play in every single scenario, because like we do that enough in regular life where it's actually true. In this one, I think it's just gross incompetence.
Yep.
Which we're used to in sports.
And you would think with the endless amount of data and everything that we have at our fingertips that
I think data is part of the problem, actually. I think the folks that have that look at data and don't look at the other stuff, I mean, I deal with this. I don't know if you deal with this at work, but I deal with this at work. We got data people. They don't do what I do, right? So they don't know the stuff that goes into the stuff I do. So you have data people that tell you things, and they don't know necessarily what the players have to do to be, to affect that change in that.
Or what it means to a fan base and what this can mean to your business overall. Yeah. I think even just as running your own business, the Mavericks made a huge mistake.
Yeah, I agree.
You lost your clients.
I agree.
This would be like, I love this brand of toothpaste, and then one day I found a razor blade in my bottle of toothpaste. I'm never buying that brand of toothpaste again. Right. No matter what they tell me or how many times they compare that toothpaste to Kobe Bryant, it's not going to matter.
Well, who's to say? Like, what if they got Cooper Flag in the draft somehow?
Right.
They win the lottery. All right, you're going to sell some Cooper Flag jerseys, but man, when are you guys going to trade Cooper Flag?
That's exactly my point with the Marlins. That's exactly my point. I think that's where they're at now. It's
well, you got to
really
have to. I mean, if the fans don't trust your team, you're kind of toast. It's back to our other conversation, right? Like, do you want them to be fans of the team or do you want them to be fans of the player? I think those go hand in hand. Michael Jordan is a Chicago Bull. The Wizards years, that's a whole weird thing, but he's a Chicago Bull. He was there for his career. Steph Curry. I think these things matter. They go like, we have gotten a little bit too far removed from, I think, the point of rooting for teams in the first place.
Let's finish it up here. Unheralded player that you're enjoying watching. We're going to a little deep dive here. Do you have any names, or do you want
honestly,
to go first?
Man, you know what? You go first, and I'll think about it, because like we do this a lot on the daily, right? Like we have the nice thing about going every day is like we did I think 3 minutes on Zeke Naji.
Let's go.
He was amazing in the game last night, right?
Yeah.
He's unlocking some things for the Denver Nuggets. So I'll start with Zeke Naji, right? To be able to have two high-level defenders coming off your bench, that's something so new for the Nuggets. And he's also he's guarding 1 through 5 for them. He had 3 blocks in the game last night. This is just a massive, massive development for the Nuggets, and has been part of the reason why I've started to improve their title chances for myself, and look at them as a real contender. So yeah, Zeke Naji, I'll give you
testament to being patient with your developmental players, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and then one day it just clicks. Yeah. And I don't know if that story has been written, but I would love to read it if it's out there about what exactly clicked for Zeke, because it's not. You mentioned the one game, but it's been lately. He's been.
Oh no, he's been good for a little bit. Yeah.
I'm gonna go Terrence Shannon Jr. from Minnesota. Not that he's necessarily been good. He's been good sometimes. Sometimes but he's wild.
He's a bull in a china shop.
He is. It's so much fun. He catches the ball and then just goes. And I will say this, from young players, you usually don't see a level of decisiveness, and that's really what jumps off the screen with him is
he's
young
25.
player you get, pass, dribble, whatever. What's that?
He's 25.
He's 25, and that's a big part of this.
Yeah.
But even just from going to the college game to the NBA game, the speed of the game and the different pictures that you're seeing and all that kind of stuff. But he's like, I get the ball, and I think I might be confusing decisiveness with just this is what I'm always going to do, and I decided that a long time ago. Either way,
He's a
it's a
one-trick
hell of
pony.
a lot of fun to watch.
It's a good trick, but
It
he's a
is.
one-trick pony. I saw him. I don't do a lot of draft prospect work because in my experience, like when I first started doing this, I used to do so much. And man, I was like grinding tape on a guy who was going to draft at 55 and never making the league. And it just, I would rather just see these guys. I'll read about them. I'll see them in summer league. I'll watch them casually. I'll see them in preseason. And then once I got a chance to get to see what they look like within their team, I get to learn who they are. But Terrence Shannon, I saw him at summer league last year and he immediately popped, right? Because this is a grown man in the gym. And this is exactly it. I called him a bull in a china shop as a player. And I think for the Wolves, that's an important thing coming off the bench for them. He's got really great size. And in a couple of these comebacks that they've had here recently, he's been on the floor for him. So I think his size allows him to compete defensively in a way that like Mike Conley just can't.
Right.
And even Dillingham can't. And then his finishing ability, the fact like it's a little bit, him and Ant are like thunder and lightning. You know, it was Lendell White and who was the other running back at USC? I can't remember. Man, I don't know why. I'm drawing a blank here on my cross sport comparison, but they're a little bit like that, right? Because Ant is such an effective driver and he uses moves to get to the basket, right? But he can finish. Whereas Terrence Shannon is just bulldozer. And you got to move. And I do think that those two guys, like having someone like that on the court for 48 minutes, as Terrence Shannon is getting more and more minutes, I think it's been really effective. There's a certain amount of being able to put the opposing defense in a blender when a guy can drive like that.
Yes.
You know, it just gets them.
Because defenses are surprised. They're like, oh, you're just going. Oh my God. Okay, now we got to scramble. Okay.
Right. And so, you know, and there aren't many players that are that effective at doing it that are not like primary initiator guys. So yeah, Terrence Shannon, man, that's awesome. This is great. We could do this. We could do another hour of this because this
like
is my thing.
Old Marlins players.
Look, the skill curve in the NBA is flattening.
Yeah.
To a huge degree where your the fifth best guy on your team is not that much better than the 10th best guy on your team. And the fourth best guy, like there's a little bit of a bump, but even like your third best player, when he gets the opportunity, gets the minutes, oh, wow. Oh, so this guy can score 30. I mean, think about Norm Powell. You know, you can't even call him unheralded because I think everybody knows that he was an all-star this year. But a guy like Norm Powell, he gets more reps, gets more minutes, gets more responsibility. And oh, what do you know? He's got the skill, he's got the game. So there's so many guys every single night that are, I mean, Colin Gillespie the other night comes off the bench and just, oh, hey, look, you know what?
Three-pointer.
Here's the shot in the arm that the Suns needed.
Yep.
I don't know. It's one of the most fun times to really be locked in on the league night to night. The games are amazing. I mean, we get the Grizzlies won or lost 3 straight games on game winners. That's if you will watch every night, you get rewarded by something. But Terrence Shannon, man, I love watching that guy play. Let me think. Who else has been unheralded? I mean, because the truth is, I think that with the way things have gone, like Malik Beasley shooting the lights out, everyone knows that by now. Yeah. Chris Dunn and what he's been doing defensively, but then also being able to hit shots on the other end, I think it's been big. At you? Yeah, do it. You're more prepared for this than I am. So.
I have one more name there. Tobias Harris.
Well, unheralded by some,
unheralded,
but not unheralded by me. When the Sixers did the Paul George for Tobias Harris swap, I called it a huge mistake. When Tobias Harris got to the Pistons, I said he was their best player. Now, Cade Cunningham has supplanted him by far. Cade Cunningham has had an amazing season. Tobias Harris is a winner. Tobias Harris plays in every game. Yep. Never hear a problem. Never hear anybody saying, you know, that Tobias Harris guy kind of selfish.
Nope.
I love that.
And he's doing everything for them. He's setting screens in the middle of the floor. Yeah. And Detroit is a lot of fun to watch. And I called that out before the year. I'm like, I kind of like these guys, at least to watch. I didn't have them being a 6 seed in the East, but Cade's obviously a ton of fun. Everything that Asar Thompson does is like basketball cocaine. And then you've got Jalen Duren coming along here. They just got a bunch of guys that you like. Jaden Ivey before he got hurt. But Tobias Harris is sort of the connecting glue that just makes it all work. He's like, all right, I'm going to come up. I'm going to set a screen over here for Cade. And then I'm going to kind of flare over to here to the corner. And I'm going to be out here for the outlet pass and all these. He's doing all that kind of stuff. He leads the team in on-off, which is not surprising if you watch him play because obviously he's doing all these
Right.
things. But then he also kind of does like the old stuff that he did with the Clippers. I forgot he had that little lean to the shoulder hook shot thing.
Oh yeah, man.
We didn't see that for years in Philadelphia where he was getting paid $20 million to stand in the corner and get out of the way. I was like,
He's
oh,
also
yeah.
a really
I remember
good
this
pick and
Tobias
roll
Harris.
guy.
This is cool.
Yeah, he can be a good pick and roll scorer.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Doc Rivers actually like was pretty good about letting Tobias Harris do stuff like that. I mean, he's just a good basketball player. You know, it's the same thing with Harrison Barnes and going to San Antonio. You know, there's this high floor with guys like that. And you add good young talent around them and they're going to make all those guys better. I'm so unsurprised by the season that he's had.
He's been great.
Yeah, he's been awesome. Man, I wish I could come up with one more unheralded guy, but I talk about these guys all the time.
Well, I will direct our listeners then
Yeah.
to the Athletic NBA Daily Show. You guys do a terrific job over
Thanks,
there.
man.
I was happy to come on, and I'm happy that you were able to come on. I think we could have done this forever, but this was a good talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks, buddy.